Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Welcome back to this episode of Complaint Free Life with you, your host, Selva Monova, life coach. So, today I wanted to talk about postponing and pros and cons. If you don't remember, or if you started following me recently, you may know that, or you should know that I did this blog post on postponing your great life. I did that about a year ago, so you may want to check out just in case you want to read more about it. So now I want to talk about postponing in the context of transitioning, as I was talking a lot about transitioning this year in the humanitarian context, right? So the reason I wanted to look at the postponing pros and cons is I really, I guess, wanted to show what are the things that we may be missing out on when we're postponing. What are the things we are actually saying yes to by postponing things, which I think we're not really aware of because we tend to postpone things usually when we're not really ready to look at something, and therefore we just think that if we postpone it to a later stage, magically things will work out. But we also know that that may not really be true, and we're not really being honest with ourselves. So therefore I really wanted to break it down to what could be the pros of postponing and what could be the cons of postponing, right? So first things first, obviously we want to know what is postponing, and I have actually even looked it up certain terminology because for me, as a non-native speaker of English, sometimes I get confused between postponing, delaying, procrastination, and all of these terms. So I then looked them up, and it seems like they're all saying the same things. One is more formal than the other. So I will really focus on postponing, but I think if your brain is talking about delaying or procrastination, it seems like they're all the same thing. At least my research on that was that. So postponing basically is doing something later than originally planned, right? That's it. That's really what postponing is. But what I would love to even offer another way of looking at it is postponing is really not making decision now, but wanting to make a decision later. And now imagine your life in the current situation where you are desiring something, you're desiring something like financial stability or a stability or time with your family where you don't need to be going somewhere else, or time with your loved ones, friends, or doing something else that you really wanted to do, whatever it is that you're desiring that is not in accordance with what you're doing currently. Whatever you're doing now, whether you are in the humanitarian world or you're not in the humanitarian world, whatever you're doing now, so there is a desire, and that desire, it keeps letting itself know to you from time to time, right? And usually what we do by postponing is we just say, okay, I'll just do that later. I'll have a look at it later. I don't have time, or I am busy, or it's not the right time, whatever it is that we're explaining to us, and we're just putting it off. Now, the reasons why we might be doing that, I really wanted to categorize it into two in the hope of making it very clear. And the categories are very simple. One is we're putting it off because it's not really important to us, but we're telling ourselves that it's important. So therefore, we keep postponing it. And the other category is fear. So everything under fear could be explained in so many different ways, but eventually, if we dig down, it's fear. Fear of not working out, fear of not knowing how to do it, fear of the unknown, whatever the fear that you can think of is the fear, therefore we're postponing it. Now, in the first case, obviously, it's very easy, meaning that if we're really not being honest with ourselves, saying that this is actually not important, but we just want to find out or desire and curious about it, then we can just be honest about it and say, no, it's not time now. We're not going to do it. Right. So that seems like an easy solution. All we need to do is being honest with ourselves and say, it's not important. It's not really what I want, or it's not really what I want now, or I don't really want to prioritize my time taking decisions about it now, or I take a decision to not do it, whatever it is, and we stop it. Now it gets interesting when it comes to the fear. Now, the way that you will know that this is fear is when you can't really explain, or the opposite, you have too many explanations as to why you cannot make decision now. Right? So I really love the idea of using spectrums in explaining things. So the desire occurred here, and there is the spectrum of different versions of how desire keeps showing up to tell us that I want this and I want this. And then I think that over time, if we don't really do anything about the desire, it goes to being a pain. It turns into a pain, and then when it becomes a pain, it's difficult now to ignore it. It becomes so difficult to ignore it that we really need to make a decision. And that's when we may start overcoming some fears to really look at what's happening. But I suggest that we don't really bring our situation to the pain and make decision as soon as the desire appears. Now, the fear, I've noticed in so many different ways that fear disguises itself in so many ways to explain and argue with ourselves why we cannot make decisions. Like confusion, like it's useful to do this way. It's useful not to be making decisions immediately, or it's useful to postpone things. Well, in the absence of knowing what to do and how to do things, obviously, we're not going to do anything about it, right? So that's why fear gets disguised, masked in so many ways, so that we don't need to make a decision and keep postponing it. Now, if we look at the pros of postponing it, because oftentimes when we start explaining things, we start explaining to ourselves things why we cannot make decision, we somehow justify it, right? We explain saying that this is useful to do it, or useful to postpone it. Now, I have thought of two reasons why it could be useful to use that postponing as a strategy in life. And I don't know if you can think of any other ways to also see why useful or why postponing is useful. So if you do, you let me know. So the two broad terms or reasons why postponing could be useful. One is the delaying gratification, which we know from research, and we also know that delaying, for instance, immediate gratification in pursuing long-term gains, or delaying gratification in the name of pursuing long-term gains is useful, and we want to be doing it if we want to really create what we want in the long run, right? So the usual example could be delaying gratification, meaning that not really eating junk food and eating healthy food so that we have healthier future, for instance, is when we're not getting into, or we're not giving into our immediate gratification or immediate wanting to eat and feeling happy by grabbing just the fast food, instead waiting for the meal to be cooked in a healthy way and then eating that, or going to the gym, even if we don't want to go at this point, knowing that that may help us in the long run, right? So that could be the delaying way or the postponing things, not doing it now because our brains want to react immediately or our desires want to react immediately, but we don't really want to do that. And instead, we are thinking about our long-term well-being, and for that we're delaying it. We're not really giving into our urges or desires. So that could be useful and important, and if we can manage and master that, then we're achieving basically anything we want in life, right? But that's one of the most difficult things to do, actually, to delay it or to postpone it. And we want to do it immediately. So in other words, whatever we like doing in the moment, like surfing the internet, eating the fast food, or not working out and just being comfortable, those are the things that we like. We actually shouldn't be doing them if we are thinking of our long-term goals of achieving whatever we want. So whatever, in other words, whatever we don't want to postpone, it might be actually useful to postpone it, ironically. And the other thing, the other reason why we postponing could be useful is definitely if we are in an emotional turmoil, or if we're having a lot of strong emotions like fear, like sadness, disappointment, whatever it is that we're under the influence of, that we may not be able to make a decision in those moments. So therefore, obviously, delaying and postponing it might be very useful. But other than that, I can't really think of any other reasons why postponing could be useful, because sometimes people do say or argue with me saying that, well, it's not really the right time, or if we don't really solve or do something about it now, it will just disappear or it will just solve itself. I find it might be true if we're talking about a problem that we're trying to solve. Sometimes it might be useful to see where it's going and how it's going. So putting off and delaying it might be useful. But if we're trying to design or create something on purpose in the long run, then waiting around for things to happen on their own, I don't really know if we will get the same result that we are hoping to get in the end. Right. So if, for instance, if we're wanting to, so I imagine like this, I imagine like if we're wanting to build a house with Lego pieces, right? And then we just keep postponing, thinking that somehow things will appear and happen. I don't think that we will be able to get the Lego house that we want in the way that we want to. Even though, by the way, I've never built a Lego, or I've never touched a Lego in my life, so I have no clue what I'm talking in terms of example, but I just wanted to give you an example that you can relate to, right? So that's why if we're wanting to have that exact house in the exact way, then obviously building it, making decisions, and going for doing that, creating that, will yield what results we want, instead of hoping something to achieve or something to work out. Now, the cons of postponing, obviously, in so many ways I could explain, but I also wanted to just focus on the few that you could consider, that we may not consider very often when we're postponing things. Because one of the main cons of postponing, I think, is we may not be really aware that whenever we're postponing, we are actually saying yes to things that we don't really like, or we want things to change. In other words, we keep approving status quo if we keep postponing things, right? We are giving into fear if we keep postponing. So in other words, we're saying to ourselves that I can't really be strong, or I can't really overcome those fears, or I can't really trust myself. So therefore, I continue postponing. We are also saying yes to staying in confusion, staying in indecision, which will keep nagging and creating all of this swirl of thoughts in our head. And we are so leaving things for default and then hoping things will just work out. And we may get the result of what we may get because we just left it to the chance to make things happen, right? So I think for me personally, the biggest con of postponing and not making a decision is keep signaling myself the message that I don't trust myself to make a decision. So therefore, I don't feel like powerful to make the decision. So therefore, I just keep postponing it and postponing it, which the message that I don't want to give to myself. Now, if you want to decide not to postpone things, or even if you are postponing things and now you want to do something about it, the best way to go about it is obviously questioning things and being clear about why you're doing what you're doing. So these are the questions that I would propose that you work on if you are really trying to coach yourself, and that would be amazing to see what are the results that you come up with. So some of the questions that I have written down here, it's on the blog post as well. You can have a look. I just want to offer to you to think about it. So one of the things is, obviously, you could ask yourself is, what are you trying to achieve by postponing? What do you think will be different by then than now if you postpone, right? What are you saying yes to when you are postponing? Or what is the price of postponing? You could also really ask yourself, what are you really fearing by postponing? So in other words, being honest with yourself and saying, what are you really afraid of if you keep postponing things? If you give yourself a deadline about the decision, when would it be and why would you give yourself that type of deadline or that particular deadline? Right? Also, you could ask yourself, making a decision, will it serve in the short run or a long run? And how will you take care of yourself when you are making this decision, whatever the decision you are making? And once you answer these questions, you could start understanding why you might be postponing, and maybe it's really not important for you, so therefore you just need to be honest with yourself, or you're really having some type of fear behind it and you really want to have a look at it, and be gentle with yourself, be compassionate with yourself, and understanding and talking to yourself as to what to do and how to go about that fear that you're having. And really being aware of postponing has consequences, obviously, but I think the bigger consequences that we're not really looking at it or not really aware of is that whenever we're postponing, we are depriving ourselves of the opportunity to be courageous, depriving ourselves of the opportunity to trust ourselves in the way that we haven't trusted before, and not really honoring the desires that we have that could actually be telling us that we want this so that we can have the longer term gain instead of keep reacting to the short term gratification, right? Because I think that's something that is so difficult to overcome, is to overcome the short term gratification and go for the long term gain. So if we really paid attention to those desires, maybe they're really telling us that this is what we want in the long run. Therefore, we want to make a decision now so that we can move on to making that decision happen that will actually serve us in our highest self in the long run. So, having said this, if you want coaching on this, please do let me know. I would love to coach you on any of this, to make clarity, to make decisions, to remove the habit of postponing things, and just keep creating your life and designing your life in the way you want to, instead of just waiting for default things to occur. So, my dears, thank you so much for being with me tonight, or today, sorry. And I wish you a great weekend, and I'll be talking to you next Friday. Thank you. Bye.